My girlfriend did not just leave me. She erased me. That was the part no one understood later when they asked why I didn't simply cry, block her number, eat ice cream, and move on like heartbreak was a weather pattern that eventually passed. Mara did not break my heart like a lover. She closed my account like a banker. She packed the parts of my life she found useful, left the rest behind, and looked me in the eye as if I should be grateful she had taken the time to explain the loss. And the worst part was not even that she chose another alpha. The worst part was that she brought that alpha into the apartment I paid for, sat her on my couch, let her drink from my mug, and told me I was finally seeing the truth. What she did not know was that the woman who ruined my life would become the reason I met my wife. Before we get into the story, thank you so much for being here and supporting my channel. I would love to know where you are watching from, so tell me in the comments. Also, let me know what kind of story you want next. And if you want to support me, the best way is by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Mara was still in my apartment when I got home. That was the first insult. She had not even bothered to leave before I arrived. She was sitting on my gray couch with one leg crossed over the other, wearing the cream sweater I had bought her last winter, when she said all her clothes made her feel cheap around investors. Beside her sat an alpha I had only ever seen in magazine interviews and blurred event photos. Aveline Cross. Founder, investor, heiress. The kind of woman whose name opened doors before her hand touched the handle. She was tall, black-haired, and dressed in a navy coat that looked soft enough to cost a month of my rent. Her scent filled my apartment like cedar smoke and expensive rain. Mara's scent was all over her throat. For one stupid second, my brain refused to understand. It tried to give me other explanations. Business meeting, emergency, misunderstanding, anything except the obvious thing sitting on my couch in Italian leather boots. Then Mara looked up at me and said, "You're home early." I laughed once, not because it was funny, because my body had nowhere else to put the shock. The grocery bags were cutting into my fingers. I had bought strawberries, cheap noodles, her oat milk, and the bitter chocolate she liked when she worked late. Aveline stood first. That was interesting. The other woman, the stranger, the rich alpha with my girlfriend's scent on her skin, still had enough shame to stand. Mara did not. "I should go," Aveline said. Her voice was calm, polished, controlled. "No," I said. Both of them looked at me. Mara blinked like I had done something embarrassing. I set the groceries on the kitchen counter one bag at a time because if I moved too fast, I was going to throw something. "No one leaves yet." Mara sighed. That sigh hurt more than the scent. It was familiar. It was the sound she made when I forgot to mute myself during her investor calls. The sound she made when I asked if she would be home for dinner. The sound she made whenever my feelings became inconvenient to her ambition. "Lena," she said, "don't make this dramatic." There it was, the first knife. Not sorry, not please, not even guilt, just management. I looked at Aveline. "What is she to you?" Aveline's expression barely changed, but something moved behind her eyes. Mara should answer that. I almost respected her for that. Almost. Mara stood then, slow and irritated, as if being forced upright by consequences was an unreasonable demand. "She's someone important to my future." I stared at her. Important to my future. Not someone I slept with. Not someone I betrayed you for. Someone important to my future. I nodded slowly. "My future," I repeated. Mara crossed her arms. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I think for the first time I know exactly what you mean." Aveline reached for her bag. Mara touched her wrist. Possessive. Casual. Cruel. My stomach turned. "You brought her here," I said. Mara's face tightened. She wanted to see where I lived. "Where you lived?" The words came out soft. Dangerously soft. I looked around the apartment. The warped cabinet door I fixed myself. The second-hand table I sanded for 3 nights. The curtains I hemmed by hand because we couldn't afford custom ones. The couch I paid off in 6 installments. The little shelf by the window where my design books leaned against her business awards. You mean where I kept you alive while you were building your dream? Mara's mouth thinned. Aveline looked at Mara then. Just once. But I saw it. A small adjustment. A tiny recalculation. Maybe Mara had not told her everything. Good. Let one woman in that room discover something ugly. You're being unfair, Mara said. That almost broke me. Unfair. I had worked 2 jobs while she pitched her company. I had designed her first deck for free. I had edited her copy, made her graphics, cooked her dinner, paid late fees, smiled through networking events where she introduced me as her creative girlfriend, like I was a decorative plant with a tablet. And now I was unfair. You used my work, I said. Mara looked away. That was the first honest thing she did. You offered. I loved you. She flinched. Good. I wanted something to land. Aveline's voice came carefully. I think I should really leave. I turned to her. You knew she had a girlfriend? Aveline did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Mara stepped forward. Don't interrogate her. I smiled. It felt strange on my face. Sharp. Unfamiliar. Oh, now you're protective. Mara's cheeks flushed. Lena. No, don't say my name like you still have rights to it. Silence. My omega scent shifted then. I felt it before they reacted. The hurt inside me cracked open and spilled into the apartment, sweet and bitter, like bruised peaches and smoke. Mara's nostrils flared. Aveline went still. Alphas always reacted to omega distress, even the civilized ones. Especially the civilized ones. They liked to pretend biology was beneath them until the air told the truth. Mara hated that I smelled wounded. Not because she cared. Because it made her look like the kind of alpha who wounded omegas. Which, unfortunately for her, she was. I was going to tell you, Mara said. When? She said nothing. I laughed again, smaller this time. When the lease ended? When her people approved your funding? When you finished transferring everything useful out of my life? Aveline turned sharply toward Mara. What does that mean? Mara's expression changed. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Fear. Not of me. Of being exposed in front of someone richer. That was the moment my grief began turning into something colder. You didn't tell her, I said. Mara's jaw tightened. There was nothing to tell. No. I walked to the small shelf by the window and pulled out the blue folder where I kept copies of old invoices, freelance contracts, and the early designs for Mara's company branding. The folder was stupidly organized. I had always been like that. Careful. Hopeful. Easy to exploit. I opened it and placed the first contract on the table. Aveline looked down. Mara did not. She used my design work for her seed pitch, I said. My market visuals, my investor narrative, my user flow mock-ups. She called me supportive in public and unpaid in private. That is not what happened, Mara snapped. I looked at her. Then look at the dates. Aveline picked up the page. Mara moved too fast. Aveline, this is personal. Aveline's gaze stayed on the document. No, she said slowly. This is material. That word hit the room like a dropped glass. Material. Investor language, important language, dangerous language. Mara understood it immediately. Her face went pale. I should have felt satisfied. I didn't. I felt tired, so tired I could barely stand. Get out, I said. Mara looked at me like I had offended her. This is my home too. No, I said. It was our home when you loved me. Now it's the place where you got caught. Aveline put the document down. Mara grabbed her coat. At the door, she turned back. And because some women cannot leave without making sure the wound stays open, she smiled. Small. Beautiful. Poisonous. You were never going to fit where I'm going, Lena. There it was, the sentence underneath every sigh, every correction. Every time she told me to dress more cleanly, speak less emotionally, stop making things about feelings, understand the world, be realistic, be useful, be quiet. I looked at her, then at the groceries, the strawberries, the oat milk, the chocolate, the little offerings of a woman who still thought love could be maintained through remembering what someone liked. You're right, I said. Mara blinked. I opened the door wider. I don't fit in places built out of other people's unpaid labor. Aveline's mouth twitched. Mara saw it. That made her angrier than anything I had said. She walked out first. Aveline followed. But in the hallway, the rich alpha paused and looked back at me. For one strange second, I thought she might apologize. She didn't. She said, "You should check your business accounts." Then she left. The door closed. I locked it. I stood there for 3 seconds. Then I slid down onto the floor and broke. Not elegantly. Not like women do in movies, with one tear and perfect lighting. I sobbed into my knees while strawberries rolled under the counter and oat milk warmed in the bag. That is the memory I hate most. Not Mara's scent on another alpha, not the couch, not even the sentence about where she was going. The strawberries, bright red through torn plastic. A stupid little proof that I had come home ready to love someone who had already decided I was beneath her. My best friend Juno found me 40 minutes later. She had a spare key, a black hoodie, and the emotional subtlety of a brick through a window. She opened the door, saw me on the floor, and said, "Do I need bail money or a shovel?" I cried harder. She stepped over the groceries, crouched beside me, and took my face in both hands. "Oh, honey," she whispered. That was worse than the murder offer. Juno was not soft unless something was truly broken. "She brought her here," I said. Juno went still. "Here." I nodded. "Into this apartment?" I nodded again. "Onto the couch I helped you carry up 4 flights of stairs?" That almost made me laugh. It came out ugly. Juno stood. "Okay. I'm going to kill her." "No." "Fine. Maim." "No." "Financially inconvenience?" I wiped my face. That one might already be happening. Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I told her everything. Aveline Cross. The folder. Mara's face when the word material entered the room. And then finally the last thing Aveline had said. Juno stopped pacing. "She told you to check your business accounts?" I nodded. "Do it now." My stomach dropped. I opened my laptop with hands that did not feel like mine. At first, everything looked normal. Then I checked the connected payment portals. Then the vendor dashboard. Then the business credit account Mara had once helped me set up because she said freelancers needed more adult infrastructure. There were 3 pending authorizations I did not recognize. 1 to a consulting group, 1 to a luxury travel service, 1 to an entity named Northline Strategic Holdings. The amount beside that last one made the room tilt. Juno saw my face. "What?" I couldn't speak. She leaned over the laptop. Then she said a word I had only ever heard her use when a man once tried to grab her outside a bar. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it. It buzzed again. Juno picked it up before I could stop her. "Who is this?" A pause. Then Juno's expression changed. She handed me the phone silently. I pressed it to my ear. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. Low, calm, controlled enough to make panic feel poorly dressed. "Lena Vale?" "Yes." "This is Selene Arden." My blood went cold. Mara's older sister, the final boss of every family story. The alpha Mara hated, feared, envied, and spoke about like a locked door she had spent her whole life trying to open. I had met Celine Arden exactly twice. Once at a charity auction, where she looked at me for 3 seconds and somehow made me feel both seen and professionally assessed. Once at Mara's mother's birthday dinner, where she told a senator's wife, "That is not a question. That is a threat wearing perfume," and then continued eating soup. She was not a woman people forgot. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "Because my sister has used your business identity to move money she does not want tied to her company." The room disappeared. Juno grabbed the back of my chair. I whispered, "What?" "You need to freeze your business accounts, revoke all shared device access, and leave your apartment tonight." My mouth went dry. "How do you know this?" A pause. Then, "Because she tried a smaller version on me 5 years ago." Juno's eyes widened. I gripped the phone harder. "No. Yes. She wouldn't." I stopped. The old instinct died halfway through the sentence. She would. Of course she would. The woman who brought another alpha into my home would absolutely copy credentials from the laptop I let her borrow. Celine's voice softened by half a degree. Not comfort, precision. "Lena, my sister chooses women who mistake usefulness for intimacy. That is not your shame, but if you do not move quickly, she will make it your liability." I closed my eyes. That sentence entered me like a blade and a bandage at the same time. Juno leaned toward the phone. "She's not going anywhere alone." Celine answered immediately. "Good." Juno blinked. I almost laughed. Celine continued, "My driver is downstairs. Bring your laptop, phone, passport, tax documents, and anything with client access. Do not bring sentimental items unless they contain legal proof." Juno mouthed, "I love her." I glared through tears. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. This time, Celine did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was colder. "Because Mara believes some women can be used without consequence. A beat. And because I dislike repetition." The line went dead. Juno and I stared at each other. Then we moved. Emergency bank calls, password resets, 2-factor authentication, business platform freezes, client alerts written through shaking hands. Juno packed my documents and 3 changes of clothes. I grabbed my sketch tablet, the blue folder, and the little silver necklace my grandmother gave me before she died. At the door, I looked back at the apartment. It seemed smaller already. Not because I was leaving, because Mara's version of it had finally been stripped away. The black car downstairs looked illegal in our neighborhood. Too clean, too quiet, too expensive to exist beside the broken street lamp and the corner store with the flickering sign. The driver opened the door without asking questions. Juno climbed in first. "If this is a kidnapping," she said, "I'm haunting everyone involved." The driver did not react. I got in after her. Celine Arden lived in a glass tower near the river, in a penthouse so silent it felt less decorated than controlled. Dark floors, white walls, art with too much negative space. A view of the city that made every smaller life below look like something wealthy women could move around with 2 fingers. She stood near the kitchen island when we entered. Black trousers, white shirt, sleeves rolled once, no jewelry except a watch and a thin silver ring on her thumb. Her scent reached me before her voice did. Cold cedar, bergamot, rain against stone. My omega instincts reacted immediately. Not with fear. That would have been easier. With recognition. I hated that. Celine looked at me and did not smile. "Sit." Juno folded her arms. "Hello to you too." Celine glanced at her. "Hello, Juno." Juno froze. "You know my name?" "You called my sister a morally bankrupt raccoon on 3 separate public posts." Juno's mouth fell open. Then she pointed at Celine. "I am willing to cooperate with this alpha." I sat because my legs had stopped being reliable. Celine placed a folder in front of me. Inside were printed transfers, ownership maps, login histories, IP records, Copies of my business registration, payment authorizations, and Mara's name appearing just far enough away from everything to pretend innocence if no one looked closely. But Celine had looked closely. Apparently, Celine Arden did nothing any other way. I stared at the papers. My name was everywhere. My company, my tax ID, my apartment address, my digital signature. A cold buzzing filled my ears. She used me, I whispered. Yes, Celine said. No hesitation, no softening, no maybe, just yes. It should have hurt. It did. But it also helped. After months of Mara turning every ugly thing into a misunderstanding, there was a terrible relief in someone naming the damage without asking me to make it prettier. Juno sat beside me and put one hand on my knee. Celine watched the gesture, then looked away. Careful. Too careful. What happens now? I asked. Now you authorize my legal team to isolate the accounts she touched. Then you sleep here tonight. Tomorrow we retrieve anything useful from your apartment with witnesses. I'm not staying in your home. Celine looked at me. Not offended. Not surprised. Just waiting. I understand why you would refuse, she said, but your apartment is no longer secure. Juno nodded. She's right. I turned on her. You are supposed to be suspicious. I am suspiciously impressed. Celine ignored that. You can leave whenever you want, she said. You can call anyone. You can bring Juno into every room. You can refuse any document until independent counsel reviews it. That stopped me, because Mara had always framed choices like tests. If you trust me, sign this. If you love me, don't ask. If you believe in us, stop making everything difficult. Celine offered refusal before I asked for it. That was new. Dangerous in a completely different way. I looked down at the folder, then at the woman across from me. Why does Mara hate you? Juno inhaled sharply. Celine's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes moved. Old, ugly, familiar. Because I know what she is. That was all she said, and somehow it was enough. By 3 a.m, 2 lawyers had joined the penthouse call. By 4, my accounts were frozen. By 5, my business platforms were locked down. By sunrise, I had signed 3 emergency declarations and learned that betrayal could have footnotes. Juno fell asleep in one of the guest rooms with her boots still on. I could not sleep. I wandered into the kitchen and found Celine awake by the window, tablet in hand, city light cutting clean lines across her face. She looked up immediately. You should be resting. So should you. I will. Liar. Her mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. I searched the cabinets for tea and froze. Jasmine, my brand, the cheap one from the market near my old university. Not the luxury version. Not some expensive approximation. Mine. I turned slowly. Celine looked at the cabinet, then back at me. I asked Juno. My throat tightened. It was such a small thing. Ridiculous, really. A box of tea in a penthouse kitchen. But when someone has spent years making your needs feel like clutter, attention feels almost violent. I made the tea because my hands needed something to do. Celine stayed by the window. Neither of us spoke until the kettle clicked off. Then she said, "You are allowed to feel embarrassed." I went still. My fingers tightened around the mug. I didn't say I was. You didn't need to. I hated her a little for that. For seeing too much. For saying it cleanly. For not giving me anywhere to hide. I leaned against the counter. I hate that she made me look stupid. Celine's voice changed, not louder, lower. She made herself look predatory. I swallowed. That is not how people will see it. Then people will be corrected. The words landed with terrifying simplicity. Not comfort, not reassurance, a statement of intent. I looked at her. Do you always talk like a court order? Yes. I laughed. It escaped before I could stop it. Selene looked almost startled by the sound. Then something in her face eased. Just a fraction. That was the first time I saw it. Not softness exactly. Permission. The next day, Mara called 17 times. I answered none. She texted first with anger, then concern, then threats disguised as heartbreak. You don't understand what you're doing. Selene is using you. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. We can still protect each other. Juno read that one aloud and gagged. She means you can still protect her. I stared at the screen. My body wanted to answer. Not because I missed Mara, because old habits survive longer than love. Selene entered the room during the 8th message. She stopped when she saw my face. Do you want me to take the phone? No. She nodded once. No argument. No reaching. No alpha command, just acceptance. Somehow that made it easier to put the phone down myself. That afternoon, we returned to my apartment with 2 lawyers, one building manager, Juno, and a security woman named Petra, who looked like she had personally disappointed several armies. My apartment smelled like old grief. Mara had not come back, but someone had tried. The lock showed scratches. My desk drawer was open. My spare tablet was missing. Selene stood in the doorway and went very still. Petra said, "No one touches anything." Juno whispered, "I'm going to become a criminal." I could not even laugh. I looked at my couch. The mug still sat on the table. The one Aveline had watched Mara drink from. For some reason, that was what broke me again. Not the drawer. Not the missing tablet. The mug. Selene noticed. Of course she did. She stepped closer, then stopped. May I? I looked at her. She nodded toward the mug. I nodded back. Only then did she pick it up. She carried it to the sink, washed it carefully, dried it, and placed it in one of the boxes labeled Keep. She did not make a speech. She did not say it was just a mug. She did not tell me I could buy another one. That was when I began to understand the danger of Selene Arden. It was not her money, not her coldness, not her legal team or her impossible apartment. It was the way she treated small hurts like they deserved witnesses. 3 days later, Mara appeared at the penthouse lobby. She did not make it past security, but she sent a message through the desk. Tell Lena I know what Selena wants. Juno snorted when the concierge relayed it. Yeah, probably a functional legal system. Selene did not laugh. She read the message once and deleted it. I watched her. What do you want? Her eyes lifted to mine. The room went very quiet. From you? Yes. Nothing you do not choose to give. That answer should have made me relax. It did not. It made my heart do something reckless and inconvenient. Because there are sentences that sound romantic only because you have spent too long around people who never meant them. A week after the fraud freeze, Aveline Cross requested a private meeting. Selene refused. Aveline requested again, this time through counsel. Selene accepted, but only after asking me, not telling, asking. I said yes because fear had taken enough rooms from me already. The meeting happened in a private office above the river. Aveline arrived in a gray suit, her hair pinned back, her scent controlled so tightly it barely touched the air. She looked at me first, then Selene, then the lawyers. Mara misrepresented several facts, Aveline said. Juno, who had insisted on coming, muttered, "That's rich people for lied." Aveline's eyes flicked toward her. Selene said nothing. I folded my hands in my lap. What did she tell you? Aveline looked uncomfortable for the first time since I had met her. That you were separated, that your business assets were already partially integrated with hers, that you had consented to certain transfers as temporary support. I laughed. It came out empty. Aveline accepted it like she deserved worse. She also told me your work on her early materials was informal. Selena's voice cut in. It was foundational. Aveline looked at her, then at me. I know that now. I should have enjoyed watching her say it. I didn't. I was tired of powerful women discovering my value only after it became legally relevant. What do you want? I asked. Aveline inhaled. To cooperate, fully, and to apologize. Juno leaned back. Wow, a rare apology in captivity. I almost smiled. Aveline's gaze stayed on me. I should have asked better questions. Yes, I said. She nodded. No defense, no excuse. That helped more than I expected. Celine watched me during the whole exchange. Not Aveline, me. Like my reaction mattered more than the strategy. Like I was not simply evidence in the room. After the meeting, I stepped into the hallway because my lungs felt too small. Celine followed, but stopped several feet away. Always distance. Always choice. You handled that well, she said. I hated it. Both can be true. I leaned against the wall. Mara used to say that too. Celine went silent. I regretted saying it immediately. Then she said, Then I will find another way to say it. I looked at her. Something in my chest twisted. You don't have to edit yourself around my damage. No, she said, but I can be careful with it. That was the problem. That was exactly the problem. I knew what to do with cruelty. I knew what to do with being dismissed, used, corrected, managed. I did not know what to do with careful. Careful made me want to cry in public hallways. 2 weeks later, Mara's company suspended her. 3 weeks later, the ethics review opened. By the end of the month, her name had become the kind people said quietly in investor rooms. Not because they cared what she had done to me. People like that rarely cared when Omegas got hurt. They cared because she had become risky. Still, risk was useful. Risk could do what pain could not. It could make rich women pay attention. I moved out of my apartment before the lease ended. Celine offered to pay the penalty. I refused. She nodded. Then she found 3 lawyers who made the landlord waive it because of the documented security breach. When I accused her of paying in a different language, she said, Yes. I stared at her. She stared back. Then I laughed so hard Juno came in from the next room and yelled, Are we healing or flirting? Celine said, Possibly both. Juno screamed. I covered my face. That night, Celine and I stood on her terrace with the city below us. Cold wind, river lights, my borrowed sweater too thin for the weather. She took off her coat. I braced for her to put it over my shoulders. She did not. She folded it over the railing beside me. An offer, not an assumption. I looked at the coat, then at her. You always do that. What? Make kindness optional. Her gaze stayed on the river. It should be. I swallowed. The wind moved between us. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to step closer. Not because I was cold, because she was there. Because she had been there again and again, without taking more than I gave. Celine. She looked at me. My courage almost failed. Almost. What happens when this is over? Her expression shifted, just barely, but I had started learning her small weather. That depends what you want. I smiled sadly. You always say that. Because it keeps being true. What do you want? There, the dangerous question, the one I had avoided because I was afraid the answer would be practical, or worse, kind. Celine turned fully toward me. Her hands were at her sides, still, controlled. But her scent changed, cedar warming under rain. I want to ask you to dinner when you are no longer in crisis. My pulse kicked. That sounds very ethical. I have been trying. I laughed softly. She did not. Not quite. Then she added quieter. I also want to kiss you, but not while you might confuse rescue with affection. The world stopped. Completely. The city below went silent. The river stopped moving. My own breath turned traitor in my chest. You cannot say things like that calmly. I am not calm. That undid me more than any dramatic confession could have. Selena Arden, terrifying alpha, legal weapon, final boss of every room, stood in front of me with her hands still because she did not trust herself to move. I stepped closer. She did not. Of course she didn't. I stopped one breath away. I am not confused. Her eyes searched mine. Lena. I know what gratitude feels like, I whispered. This is worse. A tiny fracture crossed her control. Worse? Much more dangerous. Then I nodded. Only then did she touch me. One hand lifted to my cheek. Slow. Warm. Waiting until the last second for me to change my mind. I didn't. When she kissed me, it was not possession. It was not hunger dressed up as fate. It was restraint finally given permission to become tenderness. I cried afterward, which was humiliating. Selene pulled back immediately. I hurt you. No. Then why? Because you didn't. Her face changed. Understanding came over her slowly, and with it something almost painful. She rested her forehead against mine. Then I will continue not hurting you. It was not poetic. It was not smooth. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. We did not get married quickly. That came later. First came dinner. Then another. Then a brutal conversation about money. Then a worse conversation about power. Then my own apartment, because I refused to move from betrayal straight into someone else's penthouse like a rescued object. Selene hated that apartment, not because it was small, because the locks were bad. She replaced them only after I asked. That mattered. Everything mattered then. The first time she slept over, she brought her own pillow because she said mine was structurally unserious. The first time I stayed at her place by choice, Juno sent me 17 messages and one voice note that was just screaming. The first time Mara saw photos of us together, she sent one message through an old mutual friend. Be careful. Selene likes ownership. I deleted it. Not because I was certain of everything, because I was certain Mara no longer got to define danger for me. 6 months after the night of the strawberries, I opened my own studio. A real one. 2nd floor. Big windows, bad heating, perfect light. My name on the door. Lena Vale Studio. I stood outside staring at it until Juno cried, then blamed allergies, then threatened me for noticing. Selene arrived late with takeout and a stack of contract notes. I looked at the marked pages. Other girlfriends bring flowers. These are flowers. You highlighted indemnity clauses. Romantic ones. I laughed. Then kissed her in the middle of my unfinished studio, surrounded by paint cans, folding chairs, and the terrifying realization that my life had kept growing after Mara left. Selene kissed me back carefully, always carefully, until I pulled her closer and whispered, "You can stop treating me like glass." She pulled back just enough to look at me. "No," I frowned. "I am not fragile." "I know." "Then why?" "Because careful is not the same as fragile." I had no defense against that, so I kissed her again. A year later, Mara showed up at my studio. Of course it was raining. Women like Mara love weather that makes regret look cinematic. She stood in the doorway wearing a camel coat and the face of someone who had mistaken consequences for tragedy. I looked up from my desk. My whole body went cold, then warm again. That was new. Old fear knocking on a door my new life had already changed the locks on. "You need to leave," I said. Mara's mouth trembled. "Lena, please." I almost laughed. "Please." From her mouth, it sounded borrowed. "You don't get to say that to me." She stepped inside anyway. I stood. That stopped her. "Good." "I made mistakes," she said. "You committed fraud." Her face tightened. I was desperate. You were cruel. I was trying to survive. You brought another alpha into my home. Silence. Rain tapped the windows. I watched the sentence land. Not because she had forgotten, because she had hoped I would talk around it. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she whispered. There it is. What? The closest you ever get to an apology. You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry the scene was ugly. Mara looked around the studio, at my framed prints, my invoices, my client board, my name on boxes, contracts, proofs, and glass. You really built something. Yes. Her eyes shone. Some women only recognize what they lost after it grows without them. Then she said the thing I knew she had come to say. You think Selena loves you? There it was, the final weapon. When she could not take my work, my money, my home, or my name, she reached for my certainty. I smiled. Small, calm, cruel in a way I had earned. No, I said. I know she does. Mara flinched. I continued because the words were not for her anymore. They never made me smaller. They never called my work cute while using it to survive. They never treated my softness like a weakness they could spend. They never made love feel like rent. Mara's face changed. I had finally struck something real. Maybe pride, maybe regret. Maybe only the knowledge that I no longer needed her to understand me. You chose her because she's powerful, Mara said. I considered that, then shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I finally learned the difference between power and cruelty. She left without another word. When Selene came by that evening, she found me sitting on the studio floor eating noodles from the container. She took one look at me. What happened? I held up the noodles. I am thriving. Lena. I sighed. Mara came. Everything in Selene went still. Not loud, not dramatic. Worse, quiet enough to freeze the room. What did she say? I told her. All of it. The pleas, the mistakes, the survival excuse, the question about love. Selene listened without interruption. Then she asked, very calmly, Do you want me to ruin her? I choked on a noodle. She did not smile. You say that like you're offering me tea. Do you? I looked at her. My terrifying alpha. My careful love. My witness. No. Her shoulders loosened by one invisible degree. Good. Then after a beat, I already did enough. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Then I did cry. A little. Selene sat beside me on the floor without touching me. I leaned into her by choice. That was the whole story, really. Again and again. By choice. We married 2 years after the strawberries. Not because of a board. Not because of testimony. Not because I needed protection. But because one morning Selene burned toast in my kitchen, looked personally betrayed by the appliance, and I realized I wanted to watch her lose arguments with domestic objects for the rest of my life. The ceremony was small. Juno cried loudly and denied it. Aveline Cross sent flowers and a handwritten apology I kept, but did not display. Mara was not invited. Selena wore black. Of course she did. When the officiant asked if she took me as her wife, Selene said yes, like the word had lived behind her teeth for years. When it was my turn, I looked at the woman who had first handed me proof, then space, then choice, then love. Yes, I said. Not because she saved me, because she never once asked my gratitude to become a cage. Years later, people still ask how we met. Juno says, her ex committed financial crimes and accidentally delivered her to a better alpha. Selene hates that version. I love it. Not because it is accurate, because it annoys her. The truth is harder to explain. I was loved badly by a woman who thought ambition excused harm. Then I was loved carefully by a woman powerful enough to take anything, and disciplined enough to wait until I offered. That is not revenge. It only looks like revenge to people who think happiness is something you win against someone else. but happiness was never Mara losing. It was my name on my studio door, my money in my own account, my mug washed and kept, my work credited, my softness untouched by shame. And Celine, years later, standing in our kitchen with flour on her cheek because she had attempted to bake my grandmother's winter cake and lost a noble war against the recipe. I stopped in the doorway. "You're baking?" "No." "There is flour on your face." "That is unrelated." I laughed and walked to her. The kitchen was a disaster. Eggshell near the sink. Batter on the counter. A measuring cup lying on its side like a fallen soldier. Celine Arden, terror of boardrooms, destroyer of fraudulent empires, stood in the middle of it all looking mildly offended by cake. I wiped the flour from her cheek with my thumb. She caught my wrist and kissed the inside of it. Still careful. Still warm. Still mine because she chose to be, every day. "You know," I said, "this was a terrible way to meet your wife." Her mouth curved. A logistical catastrophe. A legal nightmare? An emotionally inefficient introduction. I smiled. Rain tapped the windows. The city glittered beyond the glass, still hungry, still sharp, still full of women who mistook cruelty for power. But inside, there was cake batter on the counter, paint under my nails, my studio keys by the door, and no ghosts left in my name. "No," I said softly. Celine waited. She had always learned how to wait. "To meet my wife," I said. I had to stop calling survival love. For the first time, that truth did not hurt. It sounded like freedom. And in Celine Arden's kitchen, with the cake collapsing in the oven and my wife pretending not to panic about it, freedom smelled like jasmine tea, winter rain, and a life no one else had the power to erase.